Hi Shufflers, it's Kat, Editor-in-Chief at Shuffle Online, and I'm so excited to be back with Shuffle the Podcast. I know we've been on a bit of a break, but we're back and better than ever, and I'm super excited because we have a special guest today, Becca Borrelli.
Hi.
And she's an artist based in Austin, Texas, and can you just introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Becca Borrelli, and like you said, I'm an illustrator in Austin, and I used to be a public school art teacher and have been working full-time for myself as an illustrator for about 3 years now.
And we actually met, or I didn't meet, but
we did.
Yeah. Back in South by, I think it was last year, and I was going through your booth and or I passed by your booth, and it was really interesting because I love coloring. And then you were there drawing on the board, and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. But I didn't say hi because I was shy. But then I got your card, and then I sent you an email, like, would you do an interview with me? And I was like, I was thinking you weren't going to even respond. And then you're like, yeah, definitely. And that was so exciting. And that was actually a year ago because I went back and looked.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like in the spring of 2018.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I don't do those markets as much anymore. And sometimes I think about that. Like I meet the neatest people when I do them. Mm-hmm. And I don't recall even our interaction at all. But later when you sent me that interview, I remembered our conversation a little bit. You meet a lot of people when you have an interactive coloring thing going on. So
yeah, I think you told me and my husband to get a marker and just start coloring a little bit.
Oh, you were with your husband. I remember that. Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yeah, definitely the booths, doing the marketplaces, I found that some people would be so receptive and then other people would be confused, like coloring books and coloring artwork. What do we do with this? You know? But having the interactive component where people could come and color definitely seemed to break the ice because, people are looking for stuff to do when they're walking around those places.
Yeah. And then it definitely left an impression on me because then you remember that.
Yeah. I still I ended up having that piece for a long time. Everyone colored in portions of it. It was like the Austin skyline. And then I touched it up and eventually I think I donated it to like a school. Ended up, I don't know where it ended up, but yeah, I had it for a long time and I finally found someone that wanted it. Yeah.
So then we've been in touch over the last year,
yes.
Here and there. And it's been really nice, but if we can just kind of go back to your beginnings.
Absolutely.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and went to school in Ohio and got my first teaching job in Ohio. And then I came to Austin in 2010 for graduate school in education.
And did you always draw when you were little, or was crafting, like arts and crafts, was that a big deal when you were growing up?
Yeah, I did. But I think especially when you're little, you don't realize that what you're doing is normal to you. So I didn't recognize that I drew more than the average person until I was in elementary school. And my art teacher would start, pinging my parents and telling them, oh, Becca loves to draw. And I remember when I was 7 or 8, like recognizing that maybe not everybody drew as much as I did. So it was really cool.
And then where did you said you went into education. So did you think, that was art education?
Yes, it was art education. And I used to be a kindergarten through 4th grade art teacher for 6 years. Yeah.
What was that like with the kids? Because I know it's what it's like trying to get my nephew to draw and stuff.
Little children love art. It really, like developmentally, they don't really start deciding that they're not good at art until they're about 9 or 10 years old. So I would have the kids like in that prime period where they just all thought they were artists, because they are. Like there's that famous Pablo Picasso quote that all children are artists. The problem is remaining an artist when you grow up. And so it was neat to work with 5 to 10-year-olds because they all just inherently knew that they were artistic. And it was really, really interesting for me creatively to work around, I would say probably about 150 kids a day on art. It was really rejuvenating in some ways. But ultimately it was really exhausting working within the public school system. The the drain or the grit or the grind even probably ended up being a lot. And that was ultimately what sort of pushed me to work for myself. Yeah.
Is that when you moved to Austin?
Yeah, actually I moved. So in Ohio where I was teaching, in order to renew your teaching license, you have to have a graduate degree. And I was eligible for a sabbatical. So I took a year off teaching, which was great because I just didn't have the courage to completely quit teaching. And I came to Austin with the plan of doing my courses here and then going back to my classroom in Ohio and doing research. But I just fell in love with this town. And so I stayed. Yeah.
And then where did you start here in Austin? Did you continue education or did you just go straight into your art?
I do. So I did start contract teaching at Laguna Gloria for people that are in Austin. That's like the Contemporaries Art School. And then I took a position right out of grad school, substitute teaching in Austin ISD, and that was part-time. And then I took a full-time position illustrating and sign painting for Trader Joe's, which was, I think, the very beginning of my illustration experience. Because prior to Trader Joe's, I didn't do art for myself or for other people for money at all. So that was a cool experience. But I never went back to full-time teaching after grad school. Yeah.
Wow. And then and I've talked to you about this, but you have a very distinct style and people who follow you recognize, oh, this is Becca Borrelli. Yeah. How long did it take to develop that style? And if you want to describe it for people who may not have seen it.
My style is pretty graphic. So lots of black and white shapes with bright colors, but also very organic and swirly and whimsical. And my style, I probably started drawing that way when I was in junior high. I love to doodle and to draw really whimsical, swirly drawings. But like most, I think, young people who have a distinct style, I was discouraged in some ways by a lot of my high school teachers and my college professors because going into an art field, there is some pressure to learn how to representationally draw, be more realistic. So I stopped drawing that way by the time I was 18 or 19, and I learned how to draw very realistically. And I also learned how to paint. And it wasn't until I was 30 or 31, when I was in Austin, that I started drawing that way again, because I missed it so much. And interestingly, the style that I was discouraged from using has become really recognizable, and people can tell who I am by that style now, which is pretty neat. Yeah.
Oh, that's so bad that they were telling you not to do that. And then have you talked to any of those teachers?
I actually haven't. And I recognize too that there was, especially for my high school teachers, some pressure to help me get into art school, which was one of my goals at the time. And, if you're going into an art school program, they want a portfolio that's, a certain way. So it is really interesting how the pressures of the art world can really box in creative people, into adapting styles that are a little bit more homogenous and not their own. It took me some time and getting older to finally have the courage to go back to the way I like to draw. Yeah.
What were some of your favorite artists growing up or in college that you?
Oh man. So actually my style is a little bit, I've been told, reminiscent of Peter Max, who, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's most famously known for illustrating the cover of the Yellow Submarine album for the Beatles. It's really whimsical, kind of hippie, cosmic. I think he coined the style that he uses, cosmic art. I really liked him as a kid. I ran into a whole bunch of prints of his in my grandparents' attic when I was a kid, and I loved his stuff. Also, I really love Red Grooms. Not a lot of people are familiar with him, but Red Grooms would do these huge immersive installations that you would walk through of people. I went to see one of his shows that was called Ruckus Manhattan, and he literally recreated Manhattan in the gallery that we went to see him, and you would walk through it and there would be these paper mache people yelling at each other, and buildings. He would do 2-story buildings. So you would feel like you were walking through New York, but it was an art installation. And his style is so different from mine, but I think I really appreciated the way that he captured the energy of spaces, which is another theme of my work. I love trying to capture the feeling of a space. And I use that hashtag on Instagram a lot, energy over image, for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk to you about that. And that's something, when I started following you on Instagram, I saw that a lot, and I kind of know what I interpret it in my own way, which is basically, don't try to be what you're not, or yes. Don't try to put something on Instagram. And it's really hard for me because sometimes I want to portray an image or a brand, and then I'm just like, it's so much work. And then I end up just posting something that makes me happy. And so I feel like that's what you were going for, but that's really big on your Instagram page. So can you talk a little bit about where that came from?
Yeah, it definitely, it came from it started as, in my time school teaching. I feel like I might have told you this story, but when I first started school teaching, I was really broadsided, or even maybe clotheslined by how hard it was. So I don't think a lot of people realize how challenging school teaching is. And I started obsessively watching other teachers for what they were doing to be successful. And there was this one first grade teacher I worked with, and I became really interested in her style because she was not overtly using any techniques that I could identify. Like when I had been in college, I learned about classroom management techniques and systems of helping kids like follow the rules and all these things. And she wasn't doing any of those things. She would just show up. Like I would like line up her first graders at the end of art class, and they would all be talking and going crazy. And then she would walk up to the door, and without saying anything, they would all just get quiet. She had like this presence about her. And I began to really think about the types of teachers that I worked with who had this ability to manipulate children's behavior without doing or saying anything. Like they just seem to have this energy. And the more that I like watched them and tried to incorporate that into my own teaching style, not only did my like teaching experience become better, but I noticed that my interactions in the world started to become better. That there still doesn't seem to be a whole lot of discourse around the way that energy is creative. And I feel like the people that understand that have this, I don't know, sort of like passionate, robust experience that other people don't. Like you can just tell when someone understands energy because you want to be by them. And I like love that so much that when I started illustrating for myself, I thought, what would happen if I tried to illustrate what energy looks like? And so I try to incorporate a little bit of that feeling into all my drawings.
Yeah, definitely. Your drawings are fun. Like every time I see it, it just makes you smile. So I think definitely you've accomplished that.
Thank you.
And going back to when you were here in Austin, you started creating art. What was that experience like? I mean, Austin has changed so much, and it's a creative city. But what has it been like navigating that?
I sometimes wonder if I ever could have replicated the success I've had in a different city. Austin is still really supportive of local, and that, that's where the Keep Austin Weird thing started. I know that's kind of a tired slogan now, but so my experience has been largely positive, but I also think that from the beginning, I've always just really enjoyed getting to know people. And to me, that's been probably the core of my success, is just loving people and meeting lots of people, and word of mouth has helped tremendously with building my business in Austin and my experience here. But Austin is getting bigger and really fast, as you know. So it'll be interesting to see like how that changes the experience of artists. Like we're in this cool East Side bungalow right now that's our working studio. But I sometimes wonder in another 5 to 10 years, like, will these spaces be available for artists, But right now I feel like I'm in a sweet spot that the city is really supportive of small time creatives trying to do their thing,
Yeah. And then you recently posted as well that you're changing, you're going to more custom projects. So can you talk about what that process was like, and what you're doing now? Yeah,
I really enjoy design. I like seeing the way that my art can enhance someone else's project and someone else's goals. And so I recently had decided to stop doing markets and just focusing on wholesale and custom projects. So I have been doing more murals. I recently did one with Jay Kim from Cilantro for their new location downtown. And that's been really fun. There's definitely pros and cons to doing custom work. There's a little bit more pressure to accommodate the needs of someone else versus just yourself. But I like that. I like the combination of what someone else wants and what I want coming together.
Yeah, that's really collaborative. So I'm sure that's yeah, like you said, pros and cons.
Yes, for sure.
And then I know we've talked about the business side of being an artist in Austin, and some of the I guess it would not be the fun part of this.
Oh my gosh, girl.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you talk about what that's like here in Austin as well? Or I'm sure just in general for artists.
In general, yeah. Someone recommended when I started working for myself to read this book called The E-Myth. I don't know if you've heard of it, but the E-Myth stands for the entrepreneurial myth. And it's about this idea that a lot of people that choose to work for themselves get into it for artistic reasons, for creative reasons, because maybe they're doing something for a boss and they think, well, if I did this for myself, I would have total creative freedom. But the entrepreneurial myth is that when you start working for yourself, all the things that your boss did, now you do too. And so learning how to take care of those things while also protecting time and space for my own artistic creation has been really interesting. I think school teaching helped me tremendously. I'm not totally sure if I could have done this before running a classroom. I always tell people that school teachers are basically business owners with 30 kids in the room. So if you can be a school teacher, you could definitely, I think, run a business, because what I do now is so similar to what I did in a classroom. But sometimes it's exhausting, the emails and the inventory and the systems management and the communication and the cleaning and the filing and all that stuff is like 80% of my day. And it's definitely not as whimsical and glamorous as I think a lot of people imagine being a solo artist entrepreneur would be. But the thing that I tell other makers, and that my husband has told me a couple times that really helps me keep my perspective framed in a good way, is that everything is on my own terms, which is awesome. Like, I feel like if that's what you're craving, working for yourself is the way to go, because if I don't like something, I can change it. And it takes a lot of energy, and sometimes it's really frustrating. But for me, it's less frustrating than how I felt when I was a school teacher, where I saw all of these areas that could be improved, and I was always butting up against systems that were telling me no. And so now if I butt up into anything, it's just myself, and that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you talked about talking about the art, and like the balance between being, creative and the business side. And I can imagine with social media as well, it's kind of a balance of how much to share. And we've talked about this too, yes. Outside of the podcast, but what's it been like navigating that? Because obviously it's a brand that you're trying to convey. And then nowadays people like seeing the pros and cons. Like, it's not, you just can't be perfect in some ways, but then also if you share those, I guess, failures, people want to see that, but then also how much do you want to share? And then how much do you want to share of your personal life?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Actually Brene Brown is an interesting person, and some of her work has helped me a lot in this area. She talks a little bit about vulnerability, especially in the arena of social media. And she made this delineation that I've tried to apply to my own Facebook and Instagram, where she says that if you're being vulnerable as a service to other people, and it's coming from a place where you've healed yourself, and now you're sharing some of your struggles to help other people, that type of vulnerability can be really empowering. But on the flip side of it, sometimes vulnerability is used from a place of something that's unhealed in ourselves. And so we get on social media and vent as a way to feel better, and that kind of energy isn't good. And so I've tried to tread that line, and I've tried to use Instagram as a way to share what I'm doing and also share some of my struggles and some of the real gritty parts of my experience. But I've tried to do it from a place that is empowered and not just to feel better, which can be like really seductive when you have a large following of people that will just rally around you when you feel like shit. But yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, how I've been trying to move forward with it. But I think there is some pressure sometimes to share stories online, and I don't think we owe anybody anything on social media. So it can be an interesting tightrope walk,
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. I think now that I think about it, a lot of people are sharing things because they want that attention in some ways, not in a bad way, but just they want to feel connected to somebody. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should share something like that so I can get that. And I'm like, no, I'm not ready yet to share those things. So now I feel better that makes more sense, is if I go through something and then I get out of it, then I can share that. And then I think that would be more helpful.
Oh yeah, I agree. But yeah, I mean, I think that I just ran across that from her like a few months ago. It was like after we talked about it. I've definitely struggled with social media for a while, like we've talked about before. Yeah.
But now we can talk about the good stuff.
Yes.
I do want to talk about travel. And like you said, space is a big part of your work. Can you talk about like when you travel, because you recently went to, was it Scotland or Ireland?
Yeah, in Iceland. Yeah.
Iceland. All three.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then I saw that you would show a picture and then you were also drawing it. So can you talk about what that's like?
Yeah, actually, so much of my style is derived from a desire to make drawing easier for myself. I'm not sure how many people listening to this have learned to representationally draw, but there is some anxiety that comes with learning how to draw realistically, because you're constantly comparing what you draw to the real world and like seeing how it measures up. And so for me, it's been really freeing to I think one of the ones I posted was the Cliffs of Moher. And so in the process of trying to draw this like beautiful, creation of nature, when I would run into some anxiety around like some of the rocks or whatever, that's when I start getting really swirly. And it's a neat way to circumvent some of the anxiety that comes from drawing, and then weirdly it makes the drawing pretty cool and unique. So I don't know if that's, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know if that's like a cop out, but I truly do, use my style as a way to compensate for things that I'm not great at drawing. Like the swirling and the whimsy comes from a desire to make things easier for myself, for sure.
And then you've also, you have a coloring book for Austin.
Yes.
And then now I haven't seen the Texas one, but you went to all these small towns. And how did you choose which spot you wanted to do from the small towns, and if there was any that were interesting that surprised you?
Yeah, it was the Texas small town coloring book took about a year just from fitting it in around other projects. And I used that whole year to do a little bit of research. I asked a lot of people for feedback on towns. I also looked up census information, and I tried not to go to any place that had more than 10,000 people. And then I ended up isolating it down to 15 places, or I think 20 places, but I ended up only drawing 15. And it was good. I tried to go to all the spaces in that book, and it was really helpful to do that because I learned a lot. I remember one of the first towns that I went to was with Jason, my husband, and we went to Bandera. And the first night there, I asked our waitress, what would she draw about Bandera? And her first reaction was the bars, and we all laughed. But then she said, no, actually, she said, we're one of the few towns left in Texas that still has horse ties that are used. And so the next morning when we got up, we were walking around, and sure enough, there's these horse ties like outside of the bank, and people go and tie up their horse in front of it before depositing their money still. And so that ended up being the illustration for the Texas book. And I don't know if I would have learned that without talking to people in the town. So visiting the spaces was cool.
Do you have, are you going to do another edition of Small Town, or what's your?
Yeah, actually. So interestingly, I've been talking with the Texas Highway Magazine about picking up the Small Town Texas book for their online shop. And they had requested that we partner together to do one that is of the larger cities in Texas. I have these really cool dreams of doing coloring books in other cities and things like that. But at the moment, I'm really preoccupied with custom work. And so doing my own stuff is kind of on the back burner. Yeah.
And can you talk about, you do a lot of projects where, or not volunteer projects, but like you go to hospitals and you work with kids still, and also adults. You have the meditative drawing classes, right?
Yeah.
So what's that like, seeing people who, I guess they're probably, in an office most of the day and they don't really release their creative energy. What's it like seeing them kind of go through that, or what's been the most surprising thing?
Yeah, actually, so much of my illustration style and also teaching with meditative drawing started with my thesis research at the University of Texas. My thesis was observing a group of Austin public school art teachers do an art making workshop with me at the Blanton, in collaboration with the Blanton Art Museum here in town. And I was interested in just like looking and seeing how art making helped them reflect on the intersection of who they were with what they were doing in their classroom. And one of the weird things that like popped up is how our work environments are really unsustainable. All of our work environments, not just teachers, and that people learn how to like create walls to like help them manage an unsustainable work situation. And so it becomes harder to just relax into creative natural expression when you're in that boxy state all day. And so I became like really interested in how coloring and repetitive drawing could be used as a tool for helping people open back up. And I created a workshop called Meditative Drawing, and have had the opportunity to teach it to a lot of different groups in different settings. And it's been really interesting to see the way that people crave this creative outlet, that it literally has nothing to do with how good of a drawer you are. It's just you using mark making as a way to unwind. And that's been really, really rewarding, because my background, like as I was telling you, as a school teacher, especially when you're working with 5 to 10-year-olds, you can kind of watch this progress, this procession of aging that other teachers don't get because they only have one grade. And it's a little disheartening to see the way that 5-year-olds come in with so much joy and passion for learning, and then it slowly changes. And so I do have this like internal motivation to like serve people in that way. And adults, I think really crave a return to childhood, in certain ways. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think I really enjoyed the fact that there was this new craze or whatever with the adult coloring books, because I would still buy like the Scooby-Doo like books, because I was like, I want to color. But then I love that there's this new outlet for adults, because, we need something a little bit more complicated, but it's also just really nice to have that outlet. And unfortunately, like, I don't have enough, I have time, but I think you get preoccupied with just being busy, and I still haven't been able to color in the Austin coloring book that I got. And it makes me sad. And I have all these pins and things, and I don't know. What would you advise for people that say they're too busy or they don't have time?
Actually, one of the things that I share that seems to have an impact on people that are feeling busy is some research that I ran into when I was writing my thesis, there's this really interesting guy, and I'm sorry because I'm not going to remember his name or the book he wrote about his research, but he was a psychologist in the UK, and he had done his PhD work interning in refugee camps, and he was offering counseling services for children in war zones, essentially. And after he was done working with them, he went back to England and opened up his own private practice, working with more affluent children from upper middle class families. And he was really surprised to discover that these kids were having a lot of the same symptoms as these kids in war zones. And so he started doing research. And one of the things he ends up writing about that I came across is that modern life, especially for children, from a sensory perspective, is a lot like a war zone. Isn't that amazing? And so these kids who were living, for all intents and purposes, really safe physical lives were having very unsafe energetic lives. They were being bombarded by advertising and choices and constant go, 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 go. And so their brains were feeling under siege. And so he makes some recommendations in his research for how to heal those things. And one of them is to reduce choice. And coloring is an awesome way to reduce choice. It's, I've had a lot of people buy my coloring books who say they use it when, that work in office environments and they're on the phone all day. And it's just something really soothing and relaxing to do on the side. And even if it's not coloring, I think it's just interesting for people to recognize the impact that our environment is having on us. And so if it's not coloring, maybe it's something else. Like I know my father will spend all evening tinkering on his motorcycle. Like something that's repetitive and simple can be really healing, I think, for people's mental state. It's a little bit like of a tangent from the conversation around coloring, but I was so intrigued by that because I think that's part of the reason why coloring books just weirdly exploded, is that people are craving some sort of exit strategy from modern life a little bit, and coloring weirdly is a way to do that.
Yeah, I know for myself, when I work, I do crafting stuff, and I have my Cricut, for those of you who know what that is. And so now that I have a little bit more time, I've been doing that. Like I've been making some t-shirts, or I was helping my roommate, make her flowers for her wedding. And I found that when I would just go to the room and do that, I wouldn't spend time on my phone at all. And sometimes it'd be like, oh, I need to check my phone in case something happened. But it felt really nice to just kind of decompress and not be anywhere near my phone, because I'm on it a lot more than I should be. And my husband will ask me something, I have to scroll through Instagram first and then answer him, and he gets mad at me.
Yes.
And so I've been trying to get better about that. But now that I have, we had recently moved, and so I've been setting up my craft room, and I'm hoping that I'll just go in there and put my phone away and then just do creative stuff.
Oh, girl, for me, phones are the thing that are challenging. Like social media and the internet is like secondary. It's putting it in your pocket that makes it crazy. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And so you also recently, you talked a little bit about at the beginning, Lemon House. And can you talk about what it was like working from home? And then now that you have a space to come to, what's that been like for you?
Oh, wow. I don't think I realized to the extent that solitary work was affecting me negatively until I moved here. And to be fair, when I was a school teacher, I would dream about working by myself. Like you would be bombarded with so much in a school environment that the thought of being alone in a house was so glorious that when I got the opportunity to work from home, I jumped on it immediately. And I was working from home probably about 2.5 years. And it really is, I think, having a healthy work environment's a little bit of a balance. And I was really not interacting with people all day long. I would wake up and sit in silence for 8 hours working on art in my pajamas, sometimes without showering. And that psychologically will mess with you over a long period of time. So moving into Lemon House with Saffron Soul Textiles and Stamp Worthy Goods has been wonderful insofar as that I'm just connecting with other humans about the struggles of my day-to-day experience and also getting support. And then if I have a really hard deadline or something, I'll just work at home in the silence. But having the balance has been awesome. And this space, if anyone's come to visit us yet, it's pretty magical. Yeah.
Can you explain like what you guys are doing and what you're going to be doing in the future?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to create a space that people could come. But for now, it's, on an invite-only event basis. This is our working studio, so it's not an open retail storefront or anything like that. At least not at this point, but we are excited to start holding workshops here and having events. And then we do participate in the 12th on 12th Street, which is, since our space is on East 12th, we open up our doors with other 12th Street vendors on the 12th of every month. And so there has been some foot traffic in here, but generally speaking, this is our little art bungalow for just us to do our work in. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it here. So I was just like, can we record there?
Yeah. No, it feels good here, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And then it's so pretty. So
it is pretty. Thank you, Misha.
And so what are you working on next?
Ooh,
or what are you working on now?
Right now, I just sent off some drafts yesterday morning for a really cool project back to my hometown in Cleveland. I'm partnering with the University Hospital System. They're building a new teen cancer clinic, and we're doing some digital murals that are going to be printed on vinyl and installed there in this space. And it's going to be a family space for people that are long stay residents in the hospital. And I'm very excited about that. I'm also partnering with Cunningham Elementary in June. In a couple of weeks here, I'm doing an interactive mural in one of their hallways in black and white. And then in August, when the kids come back from summer break, we're going to color it in together. So those are the two big projects on my plate at the moment. I'm also doing some small custom commissions and a couple of my own projects too. Yeah.
And I just realized you work on a lot of different mediums in some ways, or like you said, you're just going to print vinyl. Where do you just learn by yourself, or like, do you also still go and, I guess, go to workshops, or how do you, navigate that when you're working on a new project that's going to involve something new?
Yeah. I stumbled upon the vinyl thing on accident a few years ago when I was partnering with, Aspen Heights. It's an apartment like tower in West Campus over by UT. And they asked me initially to do an interactive mural that the residents could color every time they signed a lease. They would color part of the mural. And then I think at some point, about halfway into the negotiation process, the designer was like, this isn't going to work. Like, it won't look good. And so she asked if there were any options that were alternatives. And I happened to be picking up an art order from my printer that day. And I talked to my printer about it, and they do these large scale vinyl decals for wall spaces. And it ended up being a really great medium. So I'm just sort of organically learning those new things. I don't, take like formal classes or workshops to stay fresh on illustration stuff. And sometimes I think that I should. And then other times I feel like I'm bombarded so easily with new information just from being out here in the world that it's not necessary to like take classes or learn anything new. But yeah, the vinyl stuff is pretty neat. I'm very excited. And it makes it easier to do murals from home. Yeah.
So when you're not drawing or, working on your business, what do you do? Do you watch TV? I know you have dogs. Obviously you probably hang out with your husband.
Yes. A lot of my free time is with dogs and husband. I do enjoy, road biking a lot. I find that has been really helpful to get out of my head. You spend a lot of time in your head when you're illustrating. And so like doing something physical has been really helpful. I enjoy road biking, and Austin's a really easy place to bike. But yeah, in general, I'm really extricated from media. Like I don't
You wouldn't have known anything about the Game of Thrones.
No, I know I wouldn't. I do sometimes watch Netflix or listen to podcasts when I'm doing art, but otherwise, like I'm not really even up on what's cool music wise or anything like that. I'm definitely like getting really old and out of touch in that way. But that's okay.
And then is there anything else you want to add or maybe give advice to other creatives? I know you touched a little bit about it, but is there anything you want to end on?
Advice. Oh man. The best advice I got was that there is to not overly listen to advice. So much of everything that's working for me is so different. Like, who is a coloring book artist? Like, that was how I got my start. And I don't know if I would have ever landed on that from listening to someone else. The best advice I got was to find a part-time job that paid my bills so that I could just try a bunch of stuff and figure it out. And that was, I think, how I landed on this really interesting, different career. And I feel really fortunate. So my best advice is to be careful about advice. But this was fun. I feel like if you're not careful and you keep asking me questions, I could just talk for another hour. So, but
we'll save that for round two.
But yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah. And then tell people where they can find you and where they can buy your art and follow you on social media.
Yeah. My website is beccajborrelli.com. And my Instagram is Becca Borrelli ATX. Most of my work is purchasable directly from my website. But there's also a link to places locally you can buy stuff. And then, Instagram is my social media of choice. I post there pretty daily. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to Shuffle the Podcast and our first interview episode with Becca Borrelli. I hope you enjoyed it, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Shuffle Online and on Facebook at Shuffle Online Now. Thanks for listening, guys.